Hey folks, Ariel over here. Today what I'm doing is picking and freezing strawberries. We are getting near the end of the harvest, so I'm not going to have as many or as large as I did, but this is when I had time to run the camera. Anyway, if you're new, welcome. My husband and I live in a little high mountain valley in the mountains of Wyoming, and we try to grow as much food as we can. So today, one of the things that we'll grow here is strawberries. And I wanted to do a little bit of a look at how we do that. So I've got strawberries in a row planted down on plastic here because of our invasive quackgrass that's all over the property. So because otherwise the grass chokes the strawberries out and kills them. So these mounds are because I've got individual strawberry plants. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on down the row. And these were planted here last spring, and they are now very productive. I have a lot more planted this spring that will be very productive next year. These should also be productive next year. But today I'm picking them. I have a decent amount of experience with picking and growing strawberries because when I was in my teens, actually till I moved to Wyoming, living in Pennsylvania, I worked for a produce dried flower farm greenhouse that did multiple things, but one of the things they did was grow quite a few acres of strawberries, both to pick to sell to people, and they had you pick where you could come pick your own. So I got a lot of experience growing and harvesting strawberries across acres of ground. We do not have that much here. We don't need that much just for us, but I have a little bit of time in my life into doing this. So when you pick a strawberry, it'll hang on the end of a little stem. If you grab the strawberry itself, I often grab it just naturally between my two fingers and pull gently, it will pop free so that there is no stem. Sometimes this little stem will break. That doesn't hurt the strawberry, other than if you're picking a bunch, as they stack up in your basket, those stems are a little bit sharp and pointy, and they will tend to jab holes in the other strawberries you're picking. So ideally you want it to pop free where you have a cap but no stem. Also, you want to pick strawberries that are actually red the whole way through. If you've only ever had strawberries from a grocery store, you may have never seen any such thing, but the flavor will and nutrients will definitely be best if they are red the whole way through. Not orange, not a white tip, not a white shoulder, etc. This is something you can get when you pick your own. It's also fairly early in the morning. It's still pretty cool out here, and strawberries will be firmer and less prone to bruising and smushing the cooler they are. So when we would pick strawberries to sell, we would be out there at 5 a.m. when there was light in the sky, but before sunrise, because that would be the coolest time of the day. And the strawberries are just a little firmer when they're cool like that, and so they don't bruise and damage when they are being picked and put in baskets or cartons or whatever you're doing, as much as they would if you pick them midday. Now, if you're going to pick a strawberry off the plant and put it right in your mouth, you can totally pick it midday or in the heat or anything else, but that's something to be aware of. If you're going to pick a bunch, the cooler they are, so usually first thing in the morning when they've been cool all night, is the best time to do it. Now, when I'm picking strawberries and not trying to talk to the camera, there's a motion I've learned that makes this efficient. If you got two hands free, this is my strawberry plant. I kind of use my one hand to grab the leaves and gently almost gather them and swipe them sideways. This exposes almost all the strawberries hanging on here. Now, a lot of these are white, they're not ready yet. Some are orange, some are half red, etc., because I already picked this plant. But I can now, as I'm looking down, see all of them and pick them. Then I let go and the leaves go back, and I go to the next plant and do the same sweeping motion, and I can see all the strawberries. That's just a little tip that if you're picking a bunch of strawberries, that will make going down, if you were going to say pick acres of strawberries, much faster. You swirl the plant, you can see the berries, pick all the ones that are red, let go, swirl the next plant with the same motion. That's just a little trick I've learned over time. Maybe that'll help you. So when you actually look at strawberry plants, you can see I've kind of moved my bird netting off to the side there. When you look straight down, see how you don't tend to see any strawberries? We'd have a lot of people come in and say, the row you gave me just didn't have any strawberries on it. So if you've never picked strawberries before and you only know what you know, this is what you do. You don't look straight down. You got to get down beside the plant, because all the strawberries will always be underneath. And even when you're beside the plant, you often have to tip the leaves back, because that's where you'll start to see them. So what that motion looks like is this. You can see how you really can't see any strawberries. I do a swirl and pull sideways, and now I can see there's a red one. I'm grabbing it between my fingers and just popping off the cap. I'm not even really gripping the strawberry. I'm just pulling it centered between my fingers. There's a red one. There's a very teeny red one. As I said, toward the end of the season, they get a little smaller. But I'm holding all the leaves, twist them this way. Got a red one here, red one there. That one's almost a little orange. Got a red one here. But I can also see, here's an orange, pinkish one. That one's actually off the next plant. There's quite a few white ones, and I let go of the leaves. That's what I've found is the easiest way to see and reach the strawberries. I go to the next plant, swirl all the leaves sideways. And I don't know if the camera can see as well in here because of the leaves of the other plant, but I can see that there's strawberries that are red and hanging on here. Delicious. A couple that have some slug holes. Lots of things like to eat strawberries aside from humans. I'm holding the leaves out of the way with my one hand so I can see. I'm grabbing all the visible red strawberries with the other. Swirl the leaves to the other side so I can see the other side of the plant. And if I get one that's too mushy and bug-eaten, chuck it out, because if you leave it in here, it will, as it rots, tend to rot the neighboring berries. So even if you're not going to eat that one, you don't want to leave it on your plant. This plant still had a good many. Because this whole handful I'm picking is all off one single plant, one side and then the other. Give my leaves a toss back, be sure there was none right in the center, there usually isn't. And now you can't see a single berry again. Another thing the plastic does, in addition to, for us, protecting the plants from being completely choked out, is it helps to keep the strawberries cleaner and drier, because the water and soil are under the plastic, and strawberries tend to very easily, when they're actually ripe, get mushy and rot if they stay wet and get molds and funguses and so on. And so where these, now I shouldn't have quite picked that one. You see how its tip is still white? That one wasn't ready and I wasn't paying attention because I'm talking to the camera. It'll still be pretty sweet, probably better than anything you can buy in a grocery store, but if I'd left that a few more days, it would have been better. So the plastic helps the strawberries sit, especially in our climate, which is dry. But we grew plastic rows of strawberries as well in Pennsylvania, which is much more humid where I grew up. And it just really helps with keeping them cleaner and drier. So this is what my basket is looking at like, and I'm gonna go on down the row. And then we're gonna head inside and talk about how we preserve these. Something else I want to show you guys, just so you know what to expect when you first start getting strawberries at the very beginning of whatever your strawberry season is. You'll tend to get a lot more. This all applies to regular strawberries, not ever bearing, which give a little bit all year but not a lot ever. These are not ever bearing. They give a lot for a few weeks and they're done. Anyway, the first picking will tend to have more big berries, kind of like some of these, depending again on your variety. Most of this basket, however, is now getting to be more like this size as we get to the end of the year. There's still a decent amount of medium-sized ones in here. but getting more like that. This was a mistake. See how that one is not red to the tip? I picked him, so I'm going to use him, but you don't want to pick them when they're like that. That would have gotten riper. You also don't really want to pick them when they're like this. One side looked really red. I didn't check carefully. The other side is still white pink. Still probably better than any berry you can buy in most stores, but that will not taste like a berry that is dead red like this. You can also see this when you remove the cap. You don't want to pull the caps off until you're going to do something with them. They'll start to get mushy. But if I don't have a knife here, so I'm going to take a bite out of it. But you can see how the dead red comes the whole way to the top on the really ripe one. And if I take a bite out, you can see how the dead red is the whole way through the center of the ripe one, and the other one's fairly white. And this is not as tasty as this. This is what you want a strawberry to actually look like when you pick it and it's ripe. Now, since my other basket's fairly full, I'm over here, I've got a new one, and I'm over here on the bed that has mostly currant bushes and stuff that's right by the edge of the garden. This is how strawberries grow if left entirely to their own devices. This is a solid mat from down here to under the currants to the far end of the bed. They put down runners anywhere they want. There's no plastic in here, and they grow a thick mat till they're almost choking themselves. Now, I'm totally happy to have them do this here because they're making a very good ground cover and keeping out almost everything else, so that is totally fine. However, it means they do not produce as many or as big or as nice of berries, and more of them tend to get moldy or other things because this is so dense that the berries stay wetter, which is just hard on a ripe strawberry. So I am going to pick this because we're still going to use the berries, but if you let them grow, this would normally be what's called a matted row. This isn't even a row, it's just a bed, but if you hear somebody talking about growing matted row strawberries, this is how they grow. This is like a bazillion plants. There's no individual plants, and it is very thick in here, and they're still going to produce nice strawberries. There's still quite a few in here, but they're not going to be as nice or as big, and primarily they're a lot harder to pick than ones grown in rows like that. I hope to eventually have lots and lots of matted areas like this all around the property and have so many other areas that I just don't pick these and leave them for the birds and everything else to eat because we have plenty. But this is how they grow naturally. And instead of being able to do my nice twist and look at individual plants and know I've picked them all, you kind of got to dig through everything here and find the berries which are hidden everywhere, and you get more that look like this. That's gotten both bird pecked and moldy from hanging in there in the damp. Once again, anytime I find one like that, I will do my best to throw it out where the birds can eat it out of the grass and where it won't make berries that are beside it slimy as they ripen. But I just wanted to show you guys what they grow like if you have matted rows of strawberries, and they make an excellent ground cover. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. They're not as pleasant to pick, and you don't get as many and quite as high quality of berries from them doing this. And I'm still going to do lots of this around the property, but primarily for the ones we plan to pick and eat, the long straight rows and having them on the plastic is really helpful. So that's just something to be aware of and know about. The berries in here also don't tend to get quite as dead red because they're not getting any good sunlight on them. Because of this being so thick, they tend to stay a little more orange, which will also mean they're not quite as sweet as the ones that can get some sunlight. But there's still a good many berries that are coming out of here. So now I'm inside. I've got 3 baskets full of strawberries, which is quite a bit. This is far more than we can eat fresh. We're going to eat some of these fresh. The rest I am going to preserve. There are many ways you could preserve strawberries. They dehydrate very well. They make delicious. I just enjoy eating dried fruit in general, but strawberries are a delicious one. You can turn them into fruit leather. You can turn them into jam. I have a bunch of jam. I don't use a ton of jam through the course of the year because most often I do eat bread. I like honey on it. I just like that better than jam. So we don't use a lot of that. And so my favorite way to preserve them is one I learned from my parents. I'm going to freeze them. Now, if you've ever bought frozen strawberries from a grocery store, they were probably whole or maybe halves in a bag. And if you kept them in the freezer too long, they probably dehydrated, kind of, you got like ice and kind of shriveled up strawberries in the bag. I don't want that, so that's not what I'm going to do. You could freeze these in any container. These particular little square containers happen to stack really space efficiently into a freezer. I have quite a few of them. I've been using them for years. You can buy them at our local grocery stores or in bigger cases. These are 1 pint each. They also come in 1 quarts, but I tend to use the pints for a lot of things. Anyway, I'm going to put the strawberries in here, but first we've got some water heating here to do. It's probably hot enough. Is we're going to make a little bit of a syrup because I don't want them to dehydrate and to get all freezer burnt. So we're going to make a syrup, kind of, that's about 1 cup of honey. This is honey, it's just crystallized. We have a good bit of crystallized honey because that is what real honey does after a little bit. It's creamy, it's nice, it's perfect for this. So I'm going to use a ratio of 1 cup of honey to 15 cups of water. So I'm going to pour a gallon of water in here in addition to 1 cup of honey. This is just enough sweetener to keep the liquid, you can pour just plain water over this, but then the liquid would kind of leach the flavor out of the strawberries and they wouldn't be very tasty when you wanted to eat them. So this is the same ratio I use when I'm canning peaches or something like that. For the same reason, I don't want to leach all the flavor out of the fruit. It is not a very powerful ratio. For instance, if you're buying canned fruit at the grocery store, heavy syrup is a 1-to-1 ratio of sugar to water. So 1 cup of water, 1 cup of sugar. For this, it would be 8 cups of sugar, 8 cups of water to make a gallon. I believe light syrup is 1-to-3 or something like this. This is 1-to-15. And I'm not measuring exactly, but this is a quart jar. I know I took about 1/4 of the jar out, so that's about 1 cup. And I'm going to use a little bit of this warm water. Doesn't have to be boiling, I just want a little warm because it takes a sec to melt the honey, but I don't really want this to be warm when I pour it over my strawberries, so that's why I'm doing this first. So I'm just going to get the honey dissolving in there. Even if you didn't have crystallized honey, it takes a minute for honey to dissolve into water. But we're just going to let that dissolve, and then I'm going to fill up the jug the rest of the way with cold water, and I will have my syrup ready to go. And you don't have to use a gallon jar for this. You can use any kind of container. If you want to mix a quart of this liquid at a time, that'd be a quarter cup of honey to the rest water, and so on. You can do any proportion. I'm going to use at least a whole gallon of syrup, so I'm making that at once. So we're just going to let that sit off to the side there. We will fill that up in a bit. And I'm going to go to cleaning strawberries. Now, I'm not actually washing them. There's no reason to wash a strawberry unless it happens to have mud or something on it. These are not certified organic or anything, but they are, there's nothing on them because I grow them and I know what's on them. I'm taking off the caps, usually cutting in half unless they're really small, and dropping into the container. And then we're going to cover, like I said, these with that syrup. Now when you freeze anything with liquid, it will expand if the liquid is water. So these little containers have this handy line right here. You don't want to, I can put some strawberries above that, but when I pour the liquid in, I can't have any liquid above that, or as it expands, it will overflow and run a sticky syrup down over the sides of my containers, and over anything else in the freezer, and that's kind of a pain. So I want to keep it below that line. I'm just removing the green caps, which I'll show you close up in a minute. There is no reason, I've seen quite a few people recently discussing what to do with the strawberry scraps and so on that you have, you know, after you've cleaned strawberries like this, to not waste it. You can make it into vinegar, you could, you know, plant them and they'll grow, etc. None of that is actually true about the strawberry cap, which is this green part. That is true about the strawberry. You can plant part of a strawberry which has seeds and it might grow. You won't know what the variety will be because it won't be a clone of a plant, because the seed is a sexual reproduction. Strawberries from known varieties are often cloned. But either way, there is no reason to waste any strawberry. While I may cut out a spot in the berry itself, if I happen to see a bug bite or something on one side, I'll cut out the other, and then I would get a little red into my cappings pile. Otherwise, because I'm taking out some fruit flesh, otherwise, cappings from a strawberry should look like this. Just the barest hint of any flesh, and if you're perfect at this, you have none on there. I'm not trying to cut off any part of the strawberry fruit, just to remove the green bit, which kind of just tastes like grass. It doesn't hurt you to eat, it's just not very tasty. So anyway, I'm going to proceed to fill up probably all these boxes and maybe more, and then I will show you pouring the syrup over it. But that is what I'm doing here. And this is just our absolute favorite way to enjoy strawberries. Sometimes Clay was hesitant, not this year because we have plenty, to even eat them fresh because we enjoy them so much in the winter when nothing else is fresh. It is very enjoyable to pull out a couple of these boxes from the freezer. You could put them into pies or cobblers or have them over ice cream or all kinds of things then if you want. That's not usually what we do. Normally what we do is pull a box out, let it partially defrost till it's, you know, you could kind of stick a fork in it. It's that texture of slushy instead of being rock hard. And then dump it in a bowl and eat the strawberries. That's our probably favorite winter dessert to eat. Half slushy frozen strawberries. They taste like they were just picked on a midsummer day, and they are wonderful. So that is one of our very, very favorite winter desserts to have, is a container of frozen strawberries from this time of year to enjoy in the cold months. So that's what we're going to do with these. This is one option to preserve strawberries, and like I said, there are many others. I also do like dehydrated strawberries. A lot of people make jam. I just don't use that much jam, and so on. So we'll check in a minute on actually putting these in the freezer. But it looks like my honey has mostly dissolved into my warm water. There's a couple chunks in there. I'm going to fill this up with cool water, and if you can, plan ahead and get this ready before you got all your strawberries done. Then it's cooled when you pour it over it, which is nice because they will freeze faster than if you pour hot liquid over them. And also I don't want to heat the berries themselves at all. Again, I don't need to measure my water. I know this is a gallon jar, so when it's full, I know I've added the correct amount of water. So if you can see here on a strawberry, I'm just using a knife to remove that green bit on the top. I'm not cutting into the strawberry itself at all. Like I said, unless there's a spot I'm cutting out. Sometimes you could do this without a knife and just twist the green bit off. That also, if you actually have a ripe strawberry, does not remove any bit of the strawberry. That's not hard at all to do either. I've just done it more often with a knife, and because I'm already holding the knife to then cut it in half, I find it faster to do that. But I'm not wasting any part of the berry, as you can see. And now I'm just going to fill up all these boxes. We are getting toward the end of the season, so I'm getting more little teeny berries like this. If one's that small, I'm not bothering to cut it in half, just dropping it in my box just as is. And then occasionally I will find there's like a slug hole that was chewed on that side, something like that, I will cut out of the berry. So I'm just looking at each one as I go, because sometimes that's on the opposite side from the side you happen to be looking at when you pick it and you miss seeing it. So this is my chance to look at the whole berry more closely, not in the leaves of the plant, and be sure that I am getting everything that I don't want to go in my freezer boxes used up. I'll try to also link to, I think you can buy these boxes on Amazon. Like I said, my local grocery store sells it. I think like layman's.com will sell you full cases of them. They normally come in little packages of, I forget, 4 or 5 or something, unless you get an entire case. I bought these quite a few years ago and have been using them for many years. They're very easy to clean and reuse year after year. And like I said, I like them because they happen to store well in a freezer without wasting a lot of space. Like round containers and stuff can just be harder to store compactly into freezer space. So that's why I like them in particular, and they're very durable. They don't crack in the freezer, and they don't crack even with little children using them. I think my parents have had the same set for 50 years or so almost now, and with lots of children in the house growing up, I don't remember one of these containers ever getting broken in any way. So they're quite durable. If you do get some, you can expect to use them for a lifetime. So that is strawberries, and I'm gonna finish getting these cleaned up here and then show you getting the syrup over them and putting them in the freezer. Just in case it's helpful for your planning, this total volume of strawberries harvested this year is almost entirely off of that about 70 feet of row that I have on the plastic. A handful came out of the matted row, but of the total harvest for the year, not much did. This day's picking was actually the largest amount that came out of the matted row. So it looks like for the year that 70-foot row is going to have produced about 75 pints of strawberries, though our total harvest with the others included is about 100 pints for the year. Just if that gives you some sense of proportion. Well, that's 20 boxes full. Now I'm going to just give my jar a little stir here, be sure my honey is all dissolved, and ladle the syrup on top. Like I said, I don't want to bring the syrup above the little line in the box. I don't know if you can see that while I'm tipping it, but there's a line right here, and even though some of the strawberries stick out of that, I want the syrup to stay right below that, because it will otherwise come up and out. It's going to come up some as it freezes, but I don't want it to overflow. So I'm going to fill each box right to there, pop their lids on, and in the freezer they go, and these will be wonderful, wonderful desserts for much of the winter at this rate, because I've still got some more to chop up here, but I'm going to get these in the freezer first. So if you want strawberries like this and you live in any of the climates that aren't the very, very hot south, give a look at some of the other videos of how to actually plant and grow strawberries, and you can do the same thing. These boxes are all the same. They used to, I believe, be always made with the clear lids, which would be my first choice, but I only have a handful of those, and unfortunately since they made a lot with blue lids, which is all right, and then they've gone to these green lids. And as you probably know, I don't really like all the bright colors. If I could, I would buy them all with these plain, clear white, but they are all the same boxes. The lids are all interchangeable, and I just wish they were all solid colored, because that is my preference. But they are quite handy for freezing a lot of things. I also freeze peas and other things in these same boxes. Off to the freezer they go. That is 76 pints of strawberries in the freezer. We've eaten more, but fresh, but that's what's in the freezer. very enjoyable winter meals right there. And you can see what I mean about these containers are fairly space efficient.
Thank you everyone for watching. It means a lot, and I hope you learned something along the way.
If you know somebody else who would enjoy this as well, share it with them.